Is that working? Yeah, okay. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. Just as so I don't forget, because I will, just one announcement. There's going to be an affordable housing symposium on Monday, November 13th from 8:30 to 12:30 at the Port Royal Sound Foundation Maritime Center. Senator Davis is going to be there. It is being sponsored and hosted by the Community Foundation of the LOWCOUNTRY. So for those of you who brought your calendars and interested in that, there will be, the event is free, but seating will be limited. I believe there will be some invitations. Weston, please, thank you. Come on up. Bill's up here. Okay, they're going to send out an invitation next week. You have to RSVP. Seating is limited. So for all those interested, please RSVP right away when you get the invitation next week. First of all, I'd like to welcome and introduce two of our representatives from the State House. Representative Weston Newton from Bluffton, and Representative Bill Hager from Jasper County. Also entering very soon, I'll introduce him, Senator Tom Davis is walking around the corner right now. So if anybody has a song they'd like to sing while I'm trying to stall for a couple of minutes before we get started. But I do have, by way of introduction, Senator Davis knows most of this anyway. From what I know of local history, 30 years ago, Bluffton and Hardeeville combined were approximately 6 square miles and probably around 2,000 people. Fast forward 30 years to today, Bluffton and Hardeeville are over 110 square miles and estimated to be approximately 45,000 people. And that doesn't include the developments that had happened in those 30 years in unincorporated Beaufort County, like Sun City and the other gated communities on 278. As a result of that development, the influx of tourists into Hilton Head and the historic town of Beaufort, I'm sure has increased, although I don't have those numbers off the top of my head. What came with that is commercial interest. Drive down 278, I'm sure that looks a lot different than it did 30 years ago. And with all that comes the need for services. Everybody who comes here and they want restaurants, they want health care, they need all kinds of trades. That means we continue to build houses to accommodate that. And those houses also now come with school children. We need schools. The cycle of development, we all know it, we've all seen it. It has brought to us what we are today, and it will continue in the next 30 years. Every one of these things I just mentioned, and we all know, bring pressure onto our roadways. I think more than anyone, Jarrett Freilich seems to have a good vision of what we will need in the next 30 years to accommodate what's happened in the past 30 years and will continue the next 30 years. So this board has asked Jarrett to give us his overview of what the needs, the roadway needs of Jasper and Beaufort County will be for the next 30 years. The presentation is about 30 minutes. The question and answers that will follow afterwards are for Jarrett to clarify anything that's involved with this. We've invited all of our state representatives and senators to come and hear this, and it will also be filmed, and I'll send it to them afterwards. The purpose of the meeting is it's information. It's to understand what the potential needs are. So we'll keep the questions to that and to this specific agenda for today. So without further ado, thank you, Jared, for preparing this for us, and the rest of the meeting's yours.
Sounds great. Thank you, Mayor Williams. I appreciate the opportunity to be here to present to Soloco, as well as having several representatives, state representatives. So today I have two goals for each of you here. First goal is to ease your worries. Everybody in the room is worrying about roads. We also mentioned schools, and I'm not going to talk about that part. All I'm going to talk about is the roads part. But my hope is by the end of the day, you at least can breathe a sigh of relief that we have a plan, that we're not wandering aimlessly, and that you can provide that plan to others when asked. So one, ease your worries, and then two, I want to be able to provide you confidence. So at the end of the day, like I said, you're going to have a plan. It's not Jared Fraley's plan. This is our plan, what we have in front of us over the next 30 years, and you're going to be able to speak to that. So when a constituent calls you or asks you, it's like, yes, we do have a plan, and here it is. So that is my overall goal. As I was preparing this presentation today, though, I was thinking, what am I going to say? Like, I'm used to talking in front of our council, but talking in front of a whole bunch of elected officials, this is a different game for me. So anytime there's a life issue, I always go back to Miss Sally Fields and Bubba Gump, or Mama Gump, and or Mama, yeah, Forrest Gump, Mama Gump, and she always has wise words to say. So Elizabeth and Jessica, if y'all could go to the next slide, or I guess that's me. But if you can pull up we'll see if this works. If not, I'll just talk from it.
The very best now, Forrest.
I remember the bus ride on the first day of school very well.
Are you coming along?
Mama said not to be taking rides from strangers.
This is a bus to school.
I'm Forrest Gump.
I'm Dorothy Harris.
Well, now we ain't strangers anymore.
All right, so just like Forrest, I felt maybe that we could interact and not be strangers. So the best way for me to do that is to convert all of you into engineers. So we're going to try our best on that. So engineering training, there's two tests that you have to take to become an engineer. The first is an FE, Fundamentals of Engineering, so you do that kind of right out of school. And the second, after 4 years of working under an engineer as apprenticeship, you can take the PE, the Professional Engineering Exam. So this is your first step, your engineering in training. How many people in the room, show of hands, so this is everybody, but up here on the dais first, have said, I do not know why there is not a stupid signal at this, or light at this stupid intersection. Okay, well, I'm putting stupid in there. Yeah, so everybody's driven around, everybody's like, why can't we just have a signal? And a signal is great a lot of times, but maybe it's not always the best answer. So let's keep moving. You've passed the first step. Let's go to the next step. This right here is a 2-lane road. Can anybody guess how much road traffic that 2-lane road can carry? What's its max, just in rough numbers? Per day? 30,000. Any up here?
12,000.
12,000.
Where's the road going to?
Yeah, that's right. There's a lot of factors that go into that. That's right. Well, in general engineering is 20,000. ADT, extra bonus points. Anybody know what ADT stands for?
Average daily trip.
All right, who was the first I heard? Said it first up here. So.
Thank you, my brother.
Average daily traffic, that's right. So, 2-lane road, that's our criteria. What about this? 4-lane, it actually looks like a 5-lane. It's supposed to be a 4-lane road. Any guesses how much a 4-lane can carry?
40,000.
40,000? 40,000, Mayor. Chairman Bassman gets a sucker. All right, so this I'm gonna really put your brains to test. 6-lane road, any idea? 60,000. I'm gonna get somebody else.
Wait a minute, this is.
No, I promise I didn't rehearse.
Come on, wait a minute.
For your second. 60,000 ADT. So those are general numbers. Obviously, it depends whether it's an interstate and has limited access or it's a road that has a lot of driveways. All that plays into it. But in general terms, 60,000 ADT. We'll go over that a little bit more as we talk today. Second question. So this right here is a standard intersection. You've got two roads bisecting one another. And what this is a graphic, a conflict diagram. So what it says, each dot is a different type of incident. So you can either have a cross where you hit somebody broadside, or you can merge into them. So you can see right there that there's 32 potential conflict points on a regular intersection. Here's the question. This is a modified intersection with no left turns. Based off what I described, which intersection is safer?
One on the left.
The one on the left, the one on the right? All right, well, so the one on the right is safer because it says it right there at the bottom, 32 conflicts versus 18 conflicts. So I'll save my sucker because I keep hearing Chairman Passman answer. So here's my question. Any guesses what that intersection on the right is called?
I know what it is.
Safer, that's a good. Michigan, where'd Michigan? That's right. Michigan left or an R cut. So engineers are not that out of the box thinkers as far as coming up with names. Any idea what R cut stands for? RCI.
I know.
Don't answer. Reduced conflict intersection. Doesn't that make sense? Obviously, we're reducing it from 32 to 18. Reduced conflict intersection. So that is your test. I heard a lot of good answers, and for the rest of the day, I'm qualifying y'all by proxy as a professional engineer. So now I feel a little bit better of us talking. So the plan, like I said, my goal is to develop this plan or tell you about the plan. It's already developed, but tell you about the plan and try to take your worries away. And I'm going to do that by throwing 2 case studies on the board. So obviously I was an engineer in college, but I did have to take a Western civilization class, so I do have a little bit of history. And what I know is that history doesn't repeat itself, but it does rhyme. Mark Twain said that, or at least they say Mark Twain said that. So let's think about the first case study. So this is Charleston. So I'll let you get your bearings to you, but you can see the peninsula there in the middle of the page. Go to the right, that is Mount Pleasant. Go to the left is West Ashley, and to the north is North Charleston. You can see the airport, and even beyond that is Summerville and North Charleston. So what's happened over the last 20 years is something that is very sensible for us and good for us to watch. So obviously Charleston has grown head over feet over the last 20 plus years. Let's see if I can get the pointer to work. I had the fortunate opportunity to get my higher education on the banks of the Ashley River at our beloved institution at the Citadel. Well, when I was there 20 years ago, which that's hard for me to remember, 20 years ago. But 20 years ago, I know, it gets worse. It gets worse. 20 years, y'all like, man, that's fresh chicken. So 20 years ago, we didn't have the opportunity to leave campus or do anything except one occasion. We could run off campus, but we were not allowed to stop while we were running. And I was like, okay, that sounds good. I can get out of the barracks and go run. Maybe not the same as drink beer or do what other students might do on a Thursday night, but I can at least go out and run. So what we would do, we would come out of the Citadel gate right here, go past Hampton Parkway, take a right on King Street, take it all the way down, come down to the Battery or to the market and the Battery, go on East Bay, back on Lockwood, and all the way back to the Citadel. A good 6-mile run. So they told us, if you leave campus, you are not allowed to walk. So you have to run that entire 6 mile. I didn't realize it was for my own safety, because between getting to the Citadel, where it is, and downtown was the middle of the ghetto. So they were telling us not to walk because, one, they didn't want to see us walking around, but they were really protecting us because it was the middle of the ghetto. But what's happened since I left the Citadel, there was no Upper King Street. Like I said, you didn't get to Charleston until you got down to Meeting Street and Calhoun Square. The tallest building at the time was Francis Marion Hotel, which I think is 8 or 9 stories. And then as you're running around the loop, you saw the hospitals, which nothing else was greater than 4 stories 20 years ago. You go there today, the same thing at the bridge. So the bridge to Mount Pleasant right here, it was a little bit further south right here. Well, I had the opportunity as a sophomore, going into my sophomore year, to work on the bridge as it was being constructed. Well, that bridge location where it was being constructed was right in the middle of the hood that I told you about already. Today, if you drive to Crosstown and you get on to 17 to go to Mount Pleasant, all you see is tower cranes. So what's happened is there's no available space in downtown Beaufort, but they have redeveloped, or Charleston, downtown Charleston, but they have redeveloped, and now you see cranes and you see 9-story buildings all over the place. Also, what's happened is Mount Pleasant. So Mount Pleasant really wasn't that developed at the time, but they've hold on. So what's happening downtown is they're redeveloping. They're taking the existing and they're updating it and making a bigger use of the existing site. What they're doing in Mount Pleasant is densifying. So when I was there, I could go to Mount Pleasant and get around and go wherever we wanted to and make it all the way to the Isle of Palms. That's where we went when we wanted to go to the beach on the weekends. Now it takes you forever because it's so much population on Mount Pleasant. The other areas around, so West Ashley, they've densified. All the development was there, but it's getting denser. And this is not a bad thing. This is just a thing. So this is what happens as a community matures. Same thing with North Charleston. There really wasn't a lot besides the Coliseum, but now you got the Tanger Outlets. You've got golf there, Top Golf. You've got a whole bunch of things. So it's really densifying. And now what you're seeing is other areas developing. So at the time when I was there, Daniel Island was nothing more than where they put spoils to dredge the river. So there wasn't a lot there. But now you go to Daniel Island and it is packed. The same with, I don't even know what they call this part of Charleston, west of West Ashley, Bees Creek, Glen McConnell, that area. So all you see is apartments and everything. 20 years ago, this was nothing. This was a blank canvas. This is now being developed. And the same thing with Somerville and North Charleston, and even, I don't know what you call beyond Mount Pleasant, I think Allendale. But what you see is this natural progression of the downtown area, the center hub gets redeveloped and grows. You go to any metropolitan city, you see bigger skyline than what Charleston has, but this is the natural progression. And the same thing with density. So then the outer areas that were not much, they get denser, and then the outer areas that were nothing start developing. So how does this look for us? This is south of the Broad. So Hilton Head is pretty much built out. So does that mean there's not going to be any development for the next 20 years? No, absolutely. So it's going to follow the same course that downtown Charleston looked. Now, whether we have 8-story high-rises or whatever that might be, that's to be determined. But I can tell you there's a lot of properties that are going to get deconstructed and redeveloped on Hilton Head. And then in Bluffton, so we've had a lot of development over the last 20 years in Bluffton. But there's still a lot of parcels that aren't fully built out. So you're going to see more density start taking place. All those PUDs that have been on the books are now starting to fill out. And then what you see going west now, out west, Hardyville, and beyond 170 is going to develop. There's plans, there's PUDs, but it really hasn't hit the road yet. So this is a natural progression. What's interesting about this is it's really a 20-year timeline. So if you think about it, Hilton Head was being built out in the 70s and 80s. That's when they were going gangbusters. And at that time, Bluffton was a dot on the map. There wasn't much besides nickel pumpers and squat and gobble. That was the only thing in Bluffton. Yeah, a couple speed traps, Pepper's Porch. That was enough. So there wasn't much in Bluffton 20 years. But in the 2000s, that's when you started seeing Bluffton starting to develop. And then now, fast forward 20 more years, 2020s, that's where you're starting to see. So this is a natural progression. It's not a bad thing, it's just a thing. It's something that we have to work through. Going north of the Broad, we're going to see it, but just on a much smaller scale. So downtown Beaufort is completely built out. You'll start to see some regeneration over the next 25 years. The same with Rebo Road. It's fully built out, as well as Boundary Street. Those areas are going to turn over and get redeveloped into higher and bigger uses. We're also going to start to see density. We start seeing that already on 170, kind of near Publix in that area, as well as downtown Port Royal. As the port develops, you're going to see that area start to densify. You're already starting to see that. And even on Ladies Island, I know that's a dangerous thing saying density on Ladies Island, but I'm not talking about Ladies Island proper. I'm just talking about right there at 21 and Sea Island Parkway and Ladies Island Drive. So that area will densify right there. And that's what we want. We want our downtowns to be dense. We want to have attractions for those folks to come to. And then lastly, north of the Broad, the developable area. So 170, you drive 170 and you just still see trees. When I drive by, I'm like, how the heck are these still trees? So they're not going to last as trees forever because you're going to start to see development. And it's programmed and planned like that in the comprehensive plan, both at the county and at the town. So that's what it looks like for us. So let's go back to Charleston for a moment. So what you see here is the traffic data, average daily traffic for these roads. And what I have circled are the highlights. So remember our single 2-lane road carries 20,000, 4-lane carries 40, and 3-lane carries 60. The biggest thing that jumps off the map right here is 526. So 526 was built, I guess, about 30 years ago, 25 years ago, and they built it as a 4-lane road. So 4 lanes should be at 40,000. Right here, we've got double that, 80,000, 70,000. The whole 526 needs widening to 6 lanes, as just from a capacity. So the thought that we have big problems in Beaufort and Hardyville and Bluffton and Hilton Head pale in comparison to what our friends in Charleston have. That completion of widening 526 from 4 lanes to 6 lanes is a $4 billion project. Now, they've been kicking that can for a while because it's a hard project, but that's what they're going to have to face in their near future. Other areas that are interesting to see, so Mount Pleasant. Mount Pleasant, again, this is 6 lanes. Johnny Dodd's running through here, and 6 lanes, so that's 60,000. So what we're saying is, hey, it can carry more than 60,000, but we have to keep incrementally doing travel demand management techniques. So what they've done is they said, we're not widening more than 6 lanes. They put a line in the sand. But what they did do, we're going to continue to manage it. So they have an adaptive signal technology that runs throughout that corridor. They limited the access points, so they have a frontage road system, and you can only get out at certain signal locations versus having free flow driveways on and off the mainland. So, and then the last thing that you're seeing, is even this. Eventually, when you have a significant primary route, 3 lanes, heavy traffic, a signal no longer works. Even though a signal works in most locations, when you get this, it introduces too much delay, there's too many movements, and the next iteration is up and over. So that's what you see down here. This is at Hungry Neck Boulevard, right before you get to the 526 interchange. So the reason it's carrying more than 62 is because it has the capacity with the overchange. And then lastly, to kind of highlight to point out, is right here. So this is the bridge. So that bridge, when they built it as 8 lanes or 4 lanes in each direction, everybody's like, holy cow, what? This is never going to get filled up. Not in my lifetime, at least. Well, you can see that it's above capacity. And it really isn't above capacity. It's just the reason it can carry more than 60,000 or 80,000 vehicles is because it doesn't have any interrupted flow. So you have a 2-mile, 3-mile section where it's just bridge, so you can carry more flow. So that's the same on the interstate. Right now DOT's working on widening from 0 to 8. On that section, there's 60,000 vehicles a day. Well, it's a 4-lane road, but it's at capacity because they're widening, but it's not as bad as you would think because there's only access at 3 access points on that 8 miles. So let's fast forward this to us. So like I said, they've got a $4 billion problem. Ours is not near that. And a lot of it, there's 3 right here that highlight. So 278 is a 4-lane road right here. So we've got 4 lanes can carry how much? 40,000, right. So right here, we're starting to get close to that. But there is still capacity right there. And the same with 170. So 40,000, there's a little bit of capacity there. So all the development that's happening, there's still room for it. What we have going on right now is interchange and intersections that are failing. So the goal is to do some short-term fixes on the interchanges and intersections while we work up the plans for the bigger roads. But right here, just past this, so you get 34,000 and 37,000 combined, and you're at 65,000. This makes a lot of sense if you drive into town any day of the week at 7 o'clock in the morning. You start hitting traffic right here at Buckwalter. So that's where the confluence of all this traffic is. That's where 6 lanes you're starting to feel some pressure because you're greater than 60,000. And then we have an interchange that it has all the movements you can ask for. So we're going to work on a project to simplify how that signal works in an effort to give some immediate relief right there. But it clears up, and this makes sense too. As you're driving towards the bridge, it clears up. The reason it clears up is because people get off on Buckwalter and then they drive on Bluffton Parkway. So when Bluffton Parkway was established, it was intended to be a parallel road and that locals would use it. That's exactly how it's being functioned and how it's used. Because if this did not exist, you would have 25,000 on top of 48,000. So this whole section would be stressed a lot more than it is today. So the fact that we have it and we've completed it all the way to the flyover right before you get to the bridge starts making sense because now we're at 60,000. So this is the corridor project, the $300 million bridge project. It makes sense because we're pushing right now 60,000 vehicles a day. And then once you get to Cross Island Parkway, again, it separates. And that's the reason when you drive on the parkway, it feels like there's no cars there because it's got more capacity than it has vehicles. And the same with US 278 business. So let's look at north of the Broad. North of the Broad, there are no circles. So there are some areas where we have some traffic on Boundary Street and the bottom section of Rebo as you cross the Bell Bridge coming into Port Royal. But it splits here, so half the traffic goes to downtown and half the traffic goes on Rebo Road. And then once you get past the main intersections, it starts dropping back down towards Hunting Island and Fripp Island. And the same thing here. So we've got 30,000 vehicles on the bridge, but even if that was to go to 40,000, it's not that big an issue because from basically here at Old Savannah Highway to Lemon Island Bridge, there's no other access point. So that's functioning similar to an interstate. So again, not that there's not work to do, but we don't have the same pressures that we have in southern Beaufort County and Jasper County that we have in northern Beaufort County. And people can stop me. I know we said questions at the end, but if anybody has questions, feel free to jump in. All right, so 30 years ago, where were we 30 years ago? And I thought it was fitting to leave Forrest Gump up there because next year, it will be 30 years since Forrest Gump was a film. So I think it was released in '94. So we're 30 years ago. Let's think about what Beaufort County and Jasper County and all looked like 30 years ago. There was no exit 8. We were worried about 278 and widening this. Man, there was not even an exit 8. We had exit, if you want to go to Hilton Head, you got off at 462 at exit 28 on a 2-lane road and you went all the way. Does anybody remember that? Okay, we've got a few in here that are halfway local. And so 170 was a 2-lane road. Does anybody remember that from Beaufort? All right. Paris Island Gateway did not even exist. Or I skipped one. 17 was a 2-lane road. So that was going out to Colleton from Jasper County through Beaufort to Colleton. All was a 2-lane road. Paris Island Gateway did not even exist. The Cross Island Parkway had I think it got built in the mid-90s. So 30 years ago, it either didn't exist or it just got constructed. And then Sea Pines Circle was there, but it was fresh. I remember going there. We played Hilton Head Prep, the school that I was going to, and I remember my mom getting to that circle and driving around 3 times because she had no clue how to get off of the circle and my mom is a saint, and she was sitting there cussing up a storm trying to get off the circle. Now it's not such a big thing. We see circles, we use roundabouts all the time. And then lastly, there was no Bluffton Parkway. So, was Beaufort County and Jasper County a desirable place to live 30 years ago? Yes, it was. Is it still a desirable place to live? Yes, it is. Well, guess what? It is going to continue to be a desirable place in 30 years. The difference is all these projects got done, and it's the same exact stuff that we're talking about today. We just have different people in the seats and different citizens that are here. So only a few of us have been here the 30 years to see this, but the fact that we're talking about the same roads and the same upgrades isn't a surprise. It's the same thing we've been dealing with for the last 30 years. But let me give you a visual of what this looks like. So this is Broad River Bridge. So there was sales tax money. Beaufort County was the first sales tax, transportation sales tax added in the entire state. In 1995, it got approved by state legislator. We tried it in 96, it failed. We tried it again in 98, and it passed. And our $40 million was the local match to 14 miles of widening from 2 lanes to 4 lanes and 2 bridges that span the Broad River and Chichessie Creek. This is 17. So in 2006, there was another Beaufort County sales tax for 6 years and $152 million. So this is US 17 and Gardens Corner. There were 6 miles of widening there. 278. So we had already widened the section from Moss Creek back to Simmonsville, but in 2006, the sales tax paid for from Simmonsville back to 170. So 6 lanes there. Old Savannah Highway went from 2 lanes to 4 lanes or 5 lanes. So from Broad River at 170 to Paris Island Gateway, that's Parker's there. Ladies Island Bridge, a whole twin bridge was added as part of the sales tax. So now we've got 2 bridges, one that has 4 lanes and one that has 2 lanes through Woods Memorial. Yeah, sorry, there's an accident, and there's probably not the best picture to show. But hey, they're using the shoulder just like they're supposed to. Ladies Island, from the base of the bridge, 2 miles of widening from 2 lanes to 4 lanes all the way up to Sea Island Parkway. Back down south, there was 4 miles of widening from 170, so from 278 to the traffic circle at 46, as well as the pathway. The Bluffton Parkway was finished and extended all the way to US 278 to flyover, as well as Boundary Street was the last project as part of that 2006 sales tax. So that was 1.5 miles. And the interesting thing about Boundary Street is we added 2 signals. It went from 5 signals to 2 signals, and yet we added capacity and we added safety. Because the reason we added capacity, just like the interstate, the less turning movements you have in a road, that's how you manage capacity. So obviously a lot of the left turns in and out of the median were removed with the landscape median islands. So that helped traffic go through. Here's a bonus question, engineering exam. Anybody have any clue on what the speed limit is for the maximum capacity of any road? 70. Interstate carries a lot of traffic. Any others? What was that? That's probably a good answer. The magic answer is 35 miles an hour. And the reason is at 70, you're taking a lot of gap between you and the car in front of you. At 20, you might be a smaller gap, but you're not moving fast enough. So right there in the middle is 35 miles an hour. So Boundary Street is for 40 miles an hour. So it's basically getting as much capacity. So even though it's still four lanes and we're at 37,000 cars, it's got more capacity built into it because of the speed limit, because of the limited access, and because of the synced up signals. In 2018, there's a sales tax of the bridge. So I heard this interesting quote from Jeff Bezos, the owner and former CEO of Amazon. They had just had an earnings call, and they smashed the analysts' earnings, and everybody was like super excited and like, man, great job, Jeff. And they're like, what's wrong? You don't look happy. And he said, well, that quarter, we booked that 3 years ago. I'm already 3 years ahead. He lives constantly in the future. So for me, not to say compare myself to Jeff Bezos, but 278 Bridge in my head is constructed. So what's our next projects? So that's what we're going to talk about in just a second. Also, Ladies Island, that's part of sales tax, and then a bunch of pathways throughout the county. That's Beaufort County. Well, Jasper County in 2016 passed their own sales tax for $30 million cars over 10 years. They've over-collected that or collected it faster. So both Beaufort and Jasper counties do not have a transportation sales tax penny on the referendum. And if they so choose, that could help fund future projects moving forward, both in 24. So this is southern Beaufort County and Jasper. I'm sure there's a map like this in northern Beaufort County, but I haven't seen it. Hardyville prepared this. And the whole point of this is to say, not to scare everybody, but basically from 170 to I-95, this is 278, and this is 170. These are all the planned developments and planned dwelling units in this region. And to sum it up, there's already 10,000 here. Sun City's adding more here, and even across the street here. This is all at East Argent, which I think has close to 10,000 dwelling units in its own. This is Margaritaville that has about 3,000. Car Track has about 3,000. Morgan Track has 6,700, and West Argent has another 6,400. All in all, there's like plans for 40,000 more people in this area. So there's a lot of things to be worried and stressed about. But just like our forefathers did, is we plan to keep this open because this is the major artery for the entire community. So the last thing we want this to do is the bottleneck. So part of Bluffton Parkway was to take traffic off of 278. Well, some way, shape, or form, this needs to continue. So what we have is 3 really good 46, Bluffton Parkway, and 278 that are carrying east-west traffic. And then we have 2 good primary routes, 170 and Buckwalter, that are carrying north-south traffic. So as this area develops, we need to look in some way, shape, or form to continue a east-west corridor so we can keep 3, just like we have over here. And then at some form or fashion, a northwest or north-south corridor similar to what we have at 170 and Buckwalter. So the plan. What is exactly the plan? Well, the plan is continue what we're doing. I just talked about all the projects that have happened over 30 years. The only difference is we have new people sitting in the seats up front and we have new people sitting in the seats in the back. So the plan is exactly the same. Lean forward into your community, protect and improve the major corridors. So for us, we've got to keep 278 improved. So it's improved right now all the way up to 170. There's got to be extensions in the future all the way to I-95. DOT is coming strong with their project to improve 95 from 0 to 8. They're also going to have a big improvement at the interchange, so we need to address that section. Obviously, we already talked about the triangle, we didn't talk about it, but everybody knows about the triangle. So 170, 278, and Argent Boulevard. Those are the projects that I'm looking at. 278 corridor bridge project is going to happen. These are the projects that we're moving into fruition. One thing to, again, not scare you, just this is the normal iteration of development. Eventually, the signals that we're putting up on 170 and 278, they may not last, specifically where we have large ingress and egress commercial centers and stuff. So the next iteration, just like Mount Pleasant and Hungry Neck Boulevard, is those signals are going to get replaced with overpasses. And I know that sounds scary, but that's just typical development and how things, it doesn't mean it has to be a monstrosity. It can look great. Just think of the bridge there at Sun City. They have a beautiful bridge. Think of Cross Island Parkway on Hilton Head. You don't even really notice it, that it's there until you're on top of it. So there's ways for us to do infrastructure in the future that's not big and ugly, but it actually harmonizes with the community that we have. But the simple fact is, in order to keep 278 alive, there's going to be interchange improvements at 170 and 278, and there's going to need to be intersection improvements to continue to provide that as free flow access as we can. That is, in essence, our interstate. We don't have any interstate in Beaufort County. Jasper County has 95. That is the interstate to the region. Like I said, improve major intersections. So we know Buckwalter needs improvements. We know 170 and 278, that interchange needs improvement. 462 and Argent Boulevard and 278 and Argent Boulevard. A lot of these are already in the works. So develop frontage roads. So on the 2006 sales tax, there were several frontage road projects. Again, similar to Mount Pleasant, We want to keep Johnny Dodds open and available. We want to keep 278, and the way we do that is not let everybody have access to the road, and they have to garner access through a consolidated driveway, whether that's a signalized intersection or not. And then plan for additional connections. So just like Bluffton Parkway 25 years ago, that was nothing. It was conceived, and we built out over the last 25 years. The continuation of that in some form or fashion needs to continue, as well as any other connecting roads to relieve stress from the major roads. And then develop the long-term local funding, what that is. DOT has state priorities. They don't always align with our local priorities. That's not a bad thing. It's just different levels of government working together. So we're going to have to, just like we have previously, Bluffton Parkway was funded by impact fees, geo bonds, and a little bit of sales tax. So those are three mechanisms that I think everybody in the room has some form or fashion of those: development impact fees, future sales tax, and obviously issuing geo bond debt. So what's the takeaway? When you get asked and you have a constituent that complains about 170 or complains about 278, there is a plan. What I just talked to you is the plan. And after preparing for this, I realized, you know what? I'm going to write this plan out. That way we can all have it in front of us. So then when you do have something, here's an 8-page plan if you want to dive into it. But the plan, in essence, is make our major corridors, improve those, and keep them healthy. The great thing is also you have a LATS partner, a partner in LATS. This is not the group that has to be responsible for roads. There's a group that's already set up for that, and they're working the plan. All the road improvements on 278 and 170, these are being evaluated as we speak to make sure the next iteration of improvements is planned for. So you have a great partner in LATS. You guys, not you guys, you guys up front, these are your two responsibilities. This one you're going to kick me out of the room for saying. So don't say no to development. Development's going to happen. What you need to say yes, and yes and, or yes but. So most of the time when a development comes, it's a developer-driven project, and more times than not, they have not bought the property. They're doing their due diligence, they're putting in for permits, but they have not. They worked that out with the landowner and haven't bought the property. So when they come in for a zoning request or whatever they come in for, master plan approval, you have the option up here as local government to say, I like what you have, but I need you to do this, this, and this. And if they don't do it, then that's okay. But if they do it, you're at least getting a really, really good piece of development. What we don't want is to say no, and then somebody come back and they build something that meets the requirements, but is totally not part of the community. So we want to make sure that the development, that we have the best opportunity and the best development that's available. So practice saying yes, and then use some form of conjunction, and, but, and get them to do more. And then secondly, this is the tall task, is all this is great to have a plan, but unless there's money to go with that plan, it's just talk. So like I said, I mentioned 3 sources of funding already: development fees or impact fees, geo bonds, and sales tax. Those are the 3 biggest tools in the toolbox to develop projects. Then you can go after specific state grants or federal grants, but those aren't the ones that are leading into the project. So you guys are responsible for developing this funding plan, which is a really hard task, but that's what you guys get paid the big bucks for. So.
I got a question.
Yes.
So, just being here for so long, I love my surprise anyway.
Yeah, you're welcome.
So what I've seen over years with our town, we have engineering side, we have planning side, and then we have a council that has to listen and can't negotiate from the dais, developers. So if we all, and so much money goes into comp plans, if we all just stuck by the comp plan and what all the work that the Kevins and Heathers of the world and everyone else like that and the Shawns, if we stick with it, wouldn't your job be a little less stressful? So you do say yes, but if we just stick with what a lot of hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars have told us what to keep.
Well,
You know,
and
just don't come and try to put a square peg in a round hole. So that, I just want to comment
Yep,
on that.
and I'm not saying say yes to everything that comes at you. That's why we have a comp plan. And just like 170 and the Broad River Bridge, there's no plan that I can foresee in the next 25 or 30 years where that needs to be widened. Because we've got so much preserved in that area, there's limited access. So it can continue to grow in traffic and still be able to take on the traffic that it has as demand. So.
Thank you, Jared. Very good. What we're going to do now, and since we started, I want to welcome Senator Tom Davis. Thank you, Senator, for joining us. We're going to proceed within the timeframes that we have. First of all, this is for our state delegation to hear. And so I'm going to open up the question to the three of you if you have any questions of Jared. I will also, this is filmed, so we'll send this on to your delegation secretary so you can share it with your colleagues. And then after we've exhausted the questions from our state representatives here, then I'll open it up to the board, and if we have time, we'll go to the public, okay? So Senator Davis, representatives, yes. We're sharing microphones.
In terms of the funding, you mentioned essentially three local funding sources: impact fees from developers, GO bonds, and then also the sales tax, which can either be straight up or leveraging revenue bonds. To what extent has Charleston used those local revenue sources to get state revenues leverage, like SIB grants or SCDOT priorities, and how do we go ahead and take those local dollars and leverage it into state funding?
Yep.
Or has Charleston done that and provide a roadmap for
Yeah,
that?
Charleston, so the biggest source of state funding is SIB funding, State Infrastructure Bank. So they're working through that. There's some other funding either through DOT or some competitive grant stuff, but the biggest fund out there is State Infrastructure Bank. So that's what we have on 278 project. They've also worked, so Charleston County has a 25-year sales tax, transportation sales tax. They actually, when they did it in 2004, they were the second county behind Beaufort County to do transportation. They did a half penny for 25 years. Then in 10 years later, they did a complete the penny, so they did another half penny for another 25 years. So they have a 35-year rolling plan. So they have a lot of flexibility in their sales tax. So if there's unforeseen dollars that come down from DOT, they can be nimble enough to ask for it because they have the match at the local grant. So they use that sales tax as their local match on most any and all transportation projects. I'm not sure what they do with their GO bonds and their impact fees, but definitely with sales tax. The $4 billion plan for 526, they will leverage their local funds, state DOT funds, and make a presumably ask to SIB funds as well. Again, that's a $4 billion bear that they have, but they do have larger funding sources than we do.
One more question in regard to the local aspect, the impact fees. And I've talked in the past with Paul Somerville about that, and he's apparently tried for years to get the municipalities and the counties to work together on impact fees that more closely correspond with the costs imposed by development. What are the obstacles in the way of getting impact fees that do, in fact, compensate for the demands placed by development?
Yeah, so impact fees are never going to pay for the entire project. But what they do, the way they're set up by statute is that they can only be assessed on the additional the development that comes. The existing system, it can't be funded to repair or maintain the existing. It's only for new infrastructure. So if you have a widening project, a lot of that may be due to the new development and the impacts, but the cost of that widening is going to outpace the collection amount that you're going to get from impact. What impact fees have been really good for in Beaufort County, how we've used them, is to get a project started, you've got to have some money to start the design and preliminary engineering. So it's been a really good source of that. Jasper County, I know, is working on their updating their development impact fees, and Beaufort County just recently updated theirs. The other caveat on impact fees is if you don't have it on the list when the impact fee is created, then you can't use it. So there's a little bit of strings attached to that as far as the uses of impact fees, but at least locally, Beaufort County is recently updated, and Jasper County, I know, is working through that process.
Thank you.
Jared, quick, can you hear me? Obviously, you're next to me. Do I need this for the? Okay. As it relates to impact fees, when you say Beaufort County recently updated, does that mean all the municipalities in Beaufort County in the affected area are on board and collecting that same impact fee? Is Jasper County and Hardyville, are they? I mean, I guess what I'm struck with is this is a great plan.
Yep.
Is it a plan that all the municipalities and the two county governments have all bought into? Is there a collective approach to say the price tag for this plan is X, and we're going to divide that into bite-sized pieces that we can take a whack at, whether it's like we did about 278 immediate, short, and long-term
Yep.
needs. I mean, some of this stuff's not needed or will be a 30-year as there's all the build-out that's going on. But is that going, this notion of having impact fees relative to all of that, is that in place today?
Yes.
In agreement with all the municipalities and both of the governments? And
In Beaufort County,
Okay.
yes. In Jasper County, there is no county impact fee to date,
Okay.
and they're working through that. All the municipalities have an IGA in Beaufort County with the county. So they, as new development comes within the jurisdiction, they are assessing the fee. It is a county collected fee, so they'll either, however they do it administratively, will collect that fee, and it will go to Beaufort County to administer the projects. But that process was coordinated with the municipalities, so the roads within their jurisdictions are included on that capital project list to expend funds on.
Okay, so the response of the collective engineering approach and recommendation to development, not no, but yes and, do all of the governments are aligned in what the and is? What ought to be required from development, whether it's widening of the road or the traffic impact studies or the intersection improvements or whatever those contributions and
Yep.
requirements are?
No, not 100%. We're working towards that. So right now, we're going to bring it through LATS. We have this TIA ordinance. So when a development comes in and they have an impact on traffic, they have to hire a traffic engineer to do a study. That study, a lot of times,
Traffic impact
traffic
analysis.
impact analysis,
The
TIA. So what they do is they'll look at their traffic and then just one intersection up and down from their traffic. Well, they might affect 2 or 3 traffic signals down, and they're not looking at that because they're representing their contract or their owner. So the proposed TIA ordinance is that we have a collected 2 or 3 on-call consultants. So whether it's a Jasper County or a Hardyville or whoever developed, they can exercise that on-call list and have our local engineer review it that has the broader scope of all the developments in the community. So they can say, not only are you affecting this signal, you're affecting the next 3 because this development is so huge. So there's not a overall plan to date that says this will need to be exactly this, this, and this. We're working through that. LATS is working on that. There's 4 access management studies that LATS is working on now. One on the lower SC 315. What's the road? I'm messing the road. 46, 315, and 170 in the lower part of Jasper County and Beaufort County. 278 from I-95 to Sea Pines Circle. 170 from 46 Circle to Boundary Street in Beaufort, and then Bluffton Parkway itself. And so those studies are going to be the groundwork to what you just asked. So when a community comes in and has a development, they can look on that study that's been adopted by LATS, and then hopefully all the municipalities sign off on those studies and say, okay, well, it says you need to do this improvement. And so that'll be another way to hold the developers for what impact they have on our system. Yeah, so this is an ask to our state delegation. Okay. So we're working through to get them funded through guide share funds, and we're working through the process with DOT. That process, and Stephanie can confirm, has been painstakingly slow. So even though we have good intentions, development's coming and we can't even get the study approved at DOT because of the minutia that we're working through. So if we can get that study expedited, that would help us have a plan in place so when the next development comes, we can say, this is what you have to do, Mr. Developer. But right now, it's tied up in DOT to get the final approval to get the plan started.
Is it to get the studies approved or get
Or the
them
money
funded?
to do the study?
Yeah, the money's approved, but it's got to be allocated in the TIP, Transportation Improvement Plan, and we're working through DOT staff.
To
but-
get them to authorize the release of the money that's already allocated for this part of the world.
Correct.
All right, well, if y'all can send us a memo, we'll
Yeah.
try to help
Contact-
take care of that in the next handful of days.
So Stephanie's been working through Lyle Lee, who's in the, Lyle Lee is the project, there's the staff level liaison that is working directly with LAT's MPO and Stephanie.
Will you send us a brief memo? I
Yes.
expect we can help coordinate and try to move that forward to get to all members of the delegation would be helpful, and we can coordinate. Next, then, with regard to the impact fees as a component of the funding, you referenced a couple of times the 526 estimates $4 billion. What's the number on this? The plan.
On the plan, we
I
don't
mean,
have.
the plan is everything that
Yep.
put up and talked about.
We don't have an overall number. I would say it's $1 billion plus, but it's not $4 billion. It's probably in the $1 billion, $1.5 billion over the next 20 years.
Okay. And are y'all continuing to work through and try to identify? I mean, obviously, some of these projects are county road projects that are not going to be eligible for some level of state funding. Others will be. I mean, the more, that y'all begin to continue this activity, the more that we can become engaged and start looking at what we can try to do to make sure, whether it's funding the infrastructure bank and then going and pursuing the funds, or monies
Yeah.
directly from DOT.
So we're starting, just like you mentioned, the short-term, mid-term, long-term. We're doing that on every project now. So just like 170, we just released a contractor to contractor to do short-term projects at the interchange and at 462 and Argent Boulevard. We're going to do the same thing even for the Triangle project. So the Triangle project was priority number one, but in talking with Hardyville, 278 is right up there. So now we have a 1A and a 1B. So widening from I-95 to 170 on 278. There's a couple spot improvements that we can do ahead of the big project while it's getting approved at DOT and designed and permitted and all that. So we're going to attack everything with a short-term, mid-term, long-term approach.
Good.
And Wes, to your question, the Stephanie, who heads up, she's our local representative who heads up for LATS. Each one of these individual projects have a price tag to it. So we could send that to you as well. The Triangle has a price tag, 278 has a price tag, and all the things on LATS, the tip, all have a price tag, right, Mayor?
Yeah, so the long-range plan, we can send you that too. That tells all the projects. It's maybe not prioritized as much, but it doesn't make it to the transportation plan, the tip, until it's financially constrained. Until you have the money to say you can actually do the project, it can't make it, and thus can't get federal funding. The great thing, this is the great thing between Jasper County's sales tax program and Beaufort County's transportation sales tax program, because we have been successful in previous referendums, DOT and Federal Highway views, even though we don't have those referendums in place, they view that as reasonable availability of funds. So if we have a $200 million project for the Triangle on there, we don't have $200 million in the bank, but we can still at least get it to the table to try to pair up funds, because we can say that we're going to have local funds through a sales tax. So.
Got it. Okay. Well, I would never purport to speak for the delegation, but we're here to help. And so when you all have bureaucratic bumps in the road with DOT and releasing guide share, I mean, it's a big deal, a delay in trying to get ahead of some of this stuff. Clearly, where we've been in the past tells us that. Reach out. I mean, I think that's what we're all here to try to say. I applaud you all's collaboration, quite frankly, because, having been a part of county council in the late 90s when we first started doing the things that you put up on the screen earlier, DOT didn't have an idea that US 278 would need any improvements for 25 years. It wasn't on anybody's radar screen. So this is tremendous work. Thanks.
Yeah, we've always kind of been out of mind in Columbia because we're so far away down here. We see that even within the power company. It's just we're kind of the redheaded stepchild down here. And so I don't know of anything I can add. I've been here a long time. all these widening projects Jared's been talking about, I was involved with over the years, so I'm very familiar with our roadways and our systems, so I'm glad to help any way I can, but most of the questions I had have been answered with already asked.
Thank you.
And if there's ever any additional information that you want, we can make sure we get it to you, and any other members of the delegation who aren't here today. So now I'm going to open it up to the board, and we'll take that as long as you all want to stay.
So Jared, you know, the one thing I didn't hear, one thing I heard was 40,000 people. What I didn't hear was a correlation between the $100 million in the green space and trying to eliminate some of that 40,000 that would help with the traffic impact. Was that taken into consideration?
Not on what I presented from, but it definitely can be. So the green space, I believe, just got approved last night at council. So it is open and ready to accept applications. And so whether that's a full purchase of property or buying the developer rights, so appreciate the Senator Davis leading that cause and having that. And so it is a tool in the toolbox, much like impact fees or sales tax, transportation sales tax. And green space is not a short-term play, it's part of the long-term play. So we still may need a short-term intersection or a long-term corridor, but this is just, it helps subside.
Sure, but in protecting and not having concrete everywhere, you know, how does that come into play, and how can that protect our environment? I also didn't hear you mention anything about park and rides or public transportation.
Yep, so public transportation, we have a public transportation system right now with Palmetto Breeze. The issue with our transportation is we do not have density. And to make transportation, public transit really work, you need to have somebody that doesn't have the desire or the need to have a vehicle. So they have to be in close enough quarters where they can walk to everything they need to, whether it's groceries or job or whatever, and then they can get to the bus stop and ride it. Right now, we don't have that density. So as Charleston County, what they're doing right now is they're doing a bus rapid transit $1.2 or $3 billion project. So it's from Somerville all the way to downtown Charleston. The great thing is they've got the need for it. The bad thing is they didn't plan it 20 years ago. So where we are, we're at the opportunity where we're not beyond our needs for public transit. So we can plan it and have it ready, but it may not actually be full service until we get more densified areas.
And lastly, I'll say I was up in Charleston this past weekend, and it was a nightmare to drive around Charleston, but once we hit Mount Pleasant and we hit the integrated lights, it was a game changer. And hopefully ours will be up and running before the end of November, but that really does make a huge difference.
Yep.
Okay, on the Broad River Bridge, you said there's going to be no more improvement needed for that. What's the lifespan of the bridge?
DOT typically designs on a 75-year lifespan.
Okay.
So that was done about 20 years ago, so there's still sufficient lifespan in the bridge.
Anyone else? Okay, in keeping with our tradition of Soloco and of 1 hour, we have hit that. So if I'm not opening it up to the public, but if there are any questions, certainly you can email me, tell me afterwards, and we'll get you some answers. Jared, once again, thank you very much for the presentation. Gentlemen, thank you for joining us. Hopefully it was informative. We're trying to look ahead and see what we need. Obviously, it's not a meeting today for solutions. It's a meeting for looking ahead and understanding what we do need to solve. So thank you very much for joining us today. Thank you, everybody, for coming.